the Academy and the Human Cadet. The Galactic Military Academy rose like a crown of glass and alloy above the cliffs of Varys Prime. Its towers gleamed beneath the twin suns, a beacon of unity where cadets of every known species came to learn the art of war. For the galaxy, it was a place of pride. For Elias Kane, the only human cadet of his class, it was a daily reminder that he did not belong. He walked the marble-floored corridors surrounded by beings twice his size, their scales and armor clicking as they moved. Some hissed under their breath, others laughed openly. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Compact a generation ago, and most of the old powers still considered them primitives from a backwater planet. Elias' lack of claws, carapace, or venom sacs made him an easy target for ridicule. "Try not to trip over your soft feet, human," one Varkan cadet muttered as Elias passed. The reptilian's voice dripped with disdain. Elias ignored it. He had grown used to the jeers. He wasn't here to prove anything to them, at least not yet. The day's lecture was in strategic predatory studies, a subject the aliens treated with a strange mixture of bravado and fear. The hall was shaped like an amphitheater, with tiered seats overlooking a holographic projector. Instructor Zyrol, a chitinous being whose 6 eyes glimmered with authority, activated the display. A creature materialized above the podium, 6-limbed, armored, and bristling with spines. Its mandibles clicked as though it were alive. Several cadets flinched instinctively. "Observe," Zyrol intoned. "This is the apex predator of the Outer Rim. It has slaughtered entire platoons of trained soldiers. Its armor resists energy fire. Its reflexes surpass most sentient species. Only overwhelming force has proven effective in neutralizing it." Gasps rippled through the room. Some cadets exchanged boasts. "My kind's venom would cripple it in a breath," a scaled Valeth cadet declared. "We'd crush it with our tusks," a hulking Bronton said, pounding his chest. Laughter followed, but Elias stayed silent. He didn't laugh at the bravado, nor did he join in the panic. Instead, he studied the hologram, its joints, its gill-like vents, the way its plates overlapped. Patterns. Weak points. His mind worked the way it always did, not with power, but with precision. The instructor's voice sharpened. "You are cadets of the Compact, the finest our worlds have to offer. Yet do not underestimate these hunters. One mistake could end your existence." The lesson ended, but the Predator's image lingered in Elias' mind, not as something unstoppable, but as a puzzle waiting to be solved. As evening settled over the Academy, Elias retreated to the library. It was his refuge, quiet and overlooked by the others. He sat at a desk, stylus pen in hand, sketching diagrams in his notebook. Notebooks were considered archaic when every alien carried neural implants and holographic tablets, but Elias liked the permanence of ink on paper. He sketched the Predator's anatomy, circling the gill slits, marking the gaps between the armored plates. He didn't notice the shadow that fell over his work until a clawed hand reached down and plucked the notebook away. "Still scribbling with that primitive tool?" sneered Zyrith, a towering cadet with violet scales. "What do you plan to do? Stab an apex with your pen?" The group of aliens behind him howled with laughter. Elias met Zyrith's eyes, but said nothing. After a moment, Zyrith tossed the notebook back. Pages bent, but Elias smoothed them with quiet patience. Words would change nothing. When he finally returned to his dormitory, the Academy lay wrapped in silence. Stars shimmered through the viewport, distant and indifferent. Elias lay on his bunk, hands folded over his chest, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear Zyrith's mocking words. "Stab an apex with your pen." The irony of it almost made him smile. Almost. He was drifting toward uneasy sleep when the alarm shattered the stillness. Red lights bathed the corridor outside. A deep, mournful siren reverberated through the walls. Elias shot upright as the Academy's automated voice blared. "Warning! Unauthorized breach detected. Apex Predator signatures inside perimeter. All cadets to secure stations immediately." Screams echoed from distant halls. Doors slammed. Boots and claws thundered across the floor as cadets rushed past his quarters. Elias stood frozen for a heartbeat, the words burning into his mind. The predators they had just studied, the ones the instructors claimed could annihilate whole platoons, were here, and the academy was not prepared. He reached instinctively for the pen on his desk. Smooth, cold, insignificant, but it was something real, something sharp, and it was already in his hand when the first crash of tearing metal echoed down the hall. The predators had arrived. Apex predators breach. The academy shook as though the walls themselves feared what had entered. Elias pushed into the corridor, swept along by a tide of terrified cadets. The red emergency lights painted their faces in bloody hues. Some barked orders in their native tongues, but most were incoherent. Panic had stripped them of the discipline drilled into them for months. The first predator appeared at the far end of the hall. It tore through a reinforced bulkhead like paper, claws screeching against metal. 6 limbs carried it with terrifying speed, its armored body glistening under the lights. Mandibles clicked, and its eyes, faceted in black, swept across the corridor. The cadets froze. Then chaos erupted. A Bronton charged, bellowing, tusks lowered. The predator moved faster. A single swipe of its claw split the cadet from shoulder to hip. Blood sprayed the walls. The predator shrieked, a sound that rattled Elias' bones, and leapt into the scattering crowd. Blaster fire lit the hall as panicked cadets fired sidearms. But the beams only scorched its outer plates. It slammed into the shooters, mandibles closing around one alien's throat. Another cadet tried to flee, but was impaled on a barbed forelimb. Screams filled the air, mingling with the metallic scent of blood. Elias didn't scream. He watched. Every movement, every strike. The predator lunged and spun, but he saw the fraction of a pause as it reoriented, the ripple of its armored chest as it breathed, the way it tilted its head to shield its eyes from blaster fire. Patterns. Always patterns. He was shoved sideways by the stampede and stumbled into the library wing. The heavy doors sealed behind a knot of survivors, cutting off the sound of slaughter. For a moment, the only noise was the collective panting of cadets too terrified to speak. Among them were Xyrith and his cronies. Their earlier arrogance burned away. Their scales glistened with sweat, their claws trembled. Elias met Xyrith's eyes briefly. No mockery this time, only fear. The silence didn't last. A thunderous crash echoed through the doors, followed by the groan of bending steel. The predators were coming. Cadets fumbled with their weapons, but Elias already knew how it would end. They were strong, yes, but unfocused. Each would fire wildly until the predators closed the distance, and then they would die. He looked down at his hand, still clutching his pen, a slim, steel stylus meant for paper and data pads. Laughably small compared to the creatures tearing through the academy. Yet the weight of it steadied him. The doors exploded inward. Splinters of alloy rained across the room. One predator forced its bulk through the gap, eyes glowing with hunger. Screams broke out again. Shots fired, sizzling across its armored chest. The beast didn't flinch. It came straight at them. Scatter! Elias barked. His voice cut through panic, sharp and commanding. Instinctively, cadets obeyed, darting aside as the predator lunged. Elias didn't move. He waited until the last possible second, then sidestepped. The beast crashed into a desk, splintering it. Before it could recover, Elias drove his pen into the seam of its mandible joint. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to make it rear back, shrieking in fury. The aliens gaped. A human, armed with nothing but a pen, had drawn blood. The predator rounded on him, fury blazing in its eyes. Elias' heart thundered, but his mind was cold, focused. He darted between shelves, forcing the creature to follow. Its bulk made it clumsy in the narrow rows, its claws gouging wood and metal. Elias struck again, jabbing at exposed vents along its ribs, each thrust quick and precise. The cadets, watching from cover, began to understand. The human wasn't trying to overpower it. He was exploiting every weakness, every flaw, whittling it down piece by piece. The predator screamed and thrashed, smashing shelves to rubble, but Elias never stood still. He was a blur of motion, ducking, weaving, striking when it overextended. His pen left thin lines of blood across its armored hide. Insignificant alone, but cumulative. Finally, he saw his opening. The beast reared, exposing the gill slits beneath its throat. Elias lunged, driving the pen deep into the tender flesh. The predator convulsed, shrieked once more, and collapsed, twitching on the library floor. The room went silent. The cadets stared at Elias in shock, their faces reflecting awe and disbelief. Xyrath's mouth opened, but no words came. Elias stood over the fallen predator, chest heaving, blood spattered across his uniform. He yanked the pen free, wiped it on his sleeve, and met their eyes. "They're not invincible," he said quietly. "You just have to know where to look." And then another crash sounded from the far wall. More predators were coming. The human's pen. The library shook as the second predator forced its way through the wall, claws snapping chunks of stone and alloy into the air. Its screech rattled the shelves, and the cadets shrank back, some dropping their weapons in panic. Elias did not shrink. His knuckles were white around the pen, slick with the blood of the first beast. His chest burned with adrenaline, but his mind was sharp. One predator had fallen. That meant they could all fall. "Stay low. Don't shoot unless you've got a clear target," he ordered, voice firm. The aliens looked at him as though he had grown a second head. A human was giving orders, yet their instincts made them obey. The predator lunged. Elias sprinted between shelves, forcing it to follow. He ducked under a swipe that shredded an entire row of books, the air filled with paper shrapnel. He dove, rolled, and came up behind a toppled desk. "Trap it," Elias barked. "Push that shelf now." Two cadets scrambled into motion, shoving at a tall, shelving unit. It toppled sideways, crashing into the predator's flank and staggering it. Elias dashed forward, leaping onto the fallen shelf. His pen flashed like a blade as he drove it into the beast's eye. The creature howled, thrashing violently, but Elias clung to its head, stabbing again and again until dark ichor poured down its face. The cadets watched in horror and awe as the human rode the predator down, forcing it into the ground. When the thrashing ceased, Elias stood panting, yanking the pen free. His uniform was drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes were steady. "That's two," he said, voice hoarse. Xyrath, trembling, finally found his voice. How are you doing this? "Those things are unkillable. They bleed," Elias replied. He wiped the pen clean on his sleeve. "If it bleeds, it can be killed." Another crash echoed, then another. The predators were not hunting randomly. They were converging on the library, drawn by the noise. The cadets' faces blanched as three more broke through the far wall. Elias' mind raced. Straight combat would be suicide. He scanned a room. The broken shelves, hanging lights, scattered datapads. Tools. Everything could be a weapon. "Scatter and flank them," he said quickly. "Use the shelves as cover. Don't fire unless I tell you. Aim for their eyes, vents, joints. Follow my lead." Something in his tone, the absolute certainty, cut through their terror. For the first time, they looked at him not as prey, but as a commander. The predators charged. Elias sprinted toward the first, sliding under its body as claws slashed overhead. He jammed the pen upward into the seam of its abdomen, then rolled clear. The cadets fired in short bursts where he pointed, forcing the predator back toward a collapsed shelf. "Now!" Elias shouted. A Bronton cadet slammed a support beam down onto the predator's head, stunning it. Elias leapt onto its neck and drove the pen into the gill slit beneath its jaw. The beast collapsed in convulsions. The other two predators advanced, shrieking. Elias improvised again, grabbing a length of wire from a broken datapad terminal. He looped it around one predator's foreleg and yanked, tangling its limbs. "Shoot its face," he commanded. Blaster fire seared into its exposed eyes. It staggered back, thrashing blindly. Elias finished it with a single precise strike of his pen, jabbing into the soft tissue beneath its mandible until it stilled. The last predator roared, enraged. It smashed through desks, scattering cadets. Elias stood his ground, breathing hard, his body screaming in protest. His arm trembled from fatigue, but he raised the pen again, unshaken. The predator lunged, faster than the others. Elias sidestepped too late. The claws grazed his shoulder, ripping flesh. Pain flared, but he gritted his teeth and shoved the pen upward as the beast bore down. The point drove deep into its throat, hitting the vent he had studied in the hologram. The predator collapsed atop him, dead weight pinning him to the ground. For a moment, silence reigned. Then cadets rushed forward, dragging the corpse off him. Elias staggered to his feet, soaked in blood, alien and his own. Around him lay the broken bodies of 5 apex predators. The survivors stared in stunned silence. Zyrith whispered the words all were thinking. He killed them with a pen. Elias looked down at the weapon still in his hand. Dented, bent, stained black and red. It had been enough. He met their wide, fearful eyes and said simply, "Remember this. Tools and brains will beat claws and armor." Every time, the walls groaned again. Distant roars echoed. There were more predators in the academy. But the cadets no longer looked hopeless. They looked to him. For the first time, Elias Kane was not the outcast human. He was the leader, and the predators would learn what that meant. Aftermath, fear, and respect. The academy lay in ruins. Smoke curled from shattered walls. The once proud corridors now littered with rubble and corpses. Emergency sirens had fallen silent, replaced by the stench of blood and the low hum of distant fires. When the last predator collapsed beneath Elias' pen, a heavy silence swept over the survivors. The cadets, trembling and bloodied, stared at him as if he were something other than human, something they had no word for. Boots thundered through the halls. Reinforcements, armed instructors, and defense officers stormed the library. They froze at the sight before them. 5 predators sprawled across the floor, black ichor soaking into books and shattered shelves. Dozens of cadets stood alive, shaken but unbroken. And in the center of it all was Elias Kane, his uniform drenched, clutching a bent steel pen. An officer with silvered mandibles stepped forward. His compound eyes narrowed as he scanned the carnage. Who killed these creatures? Nobody spoke. Dozens of eyes turned to Elias. The officer's gaze followed theirs, settling on the bloodied human cadet. "You..." Elias swallowed, his throat dry. "I had help," he said. "We trapped them. Used what we had." A murmur rippled through the cadets, but no one contradicted him. They knew the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes. The human had killed them all. The officer studied him for a long, silent moment, then barked a command. Medics rushed forward to tend the wounded. Others began clearing the bodies. But even as the library filled with activity, every alien cadet kept sneaking glances at Elias. Fearful, reverent, uncertain. Zyrith, once his loudest tormentor, approached slowly. His violet scales were dulled with soot and blood. He lowered his gaze, voice quiet. "We mocked you, called you weak, but you fought like nothing I've ever seen." Elias, exhausted, wiped the last of the predator's ichor from his face. "I didn't fight harder," he said. "I just fought smarter." Zyrith bowed his head. For a proud Varkan warrior, it was the closest thing to an apology. By dawn, the predators' bodies had been dragged away, leaving only dark stains on the floor. The academy's instructors gathered the surviving cadets in a main hall. Hollow projectors flickered, displaying casualty numbers. Too many dead, yet far more lived than anyone had expected, and most of those survivors owed their lives to one human cadet. Instructor Zyral's 6 eyes fixed on Elias. "Reports claim you slew multiple predators with nothing but this?" He gestured to the battered pen in Elias' hand. Elias felt every eye on him. He lifted the pen, its steel bent and nicked but still whole. "It's not the weapon that matters," he said evenly. "It's how you use it." Silence stretched. Then murmurs began, spreading through the ranks. Some cadets whispered in awe, others in disbelief. But the instructors, hard, seasoned veterans, did not laugh. They only stared at him with something heavier: recognition. Word spread faster than fire in dry fields. By the end of the day, the story was circulating across the academy. By the end of the week, it was on a dozen worlds. A human cadet, armed with nothing but a pen, had slain the galaxy's most feared predators. For alien societies that had mocked humanity as frail and insignificant, the tale was unsettling. If a human could do this with a pen, what might they do with an army? With ships? With war? The cadets who had survived with him felt it most strongly. When they looked at Elias now, there was no mockery, no disdain. There was caution, respect, and in some even fear. That night, Elias sat alone in his quarters. His shoulder burned where the predator's claws had grazed him. His body trembled with exhaustion. Yet he could not sleep. He turned the pen over in his hands. The ink tip was broken, its barrel dented, stained forever with alien blood. He should have thrown it away, but he couldn't. To him, it wasn't just a pen anymore. It was proof of what humanity was capable of when pressed to the brink. A message. He thought of the instructors' faces, the whispers in the hall, the way Zyrith had lowered his head. He thought of the predators lying dead at his feet, the impossible made real. The galaxy would remember this day. Elias Kane, the human cadet, had killed apex predators with a single pen. And in that act, the galaxy had learned a truth it would never forget. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was dangerous.